Oh yeah, I am totally and completely ready for Christmas. Notice I didn't say happy holiday. I said I'm ready for Christmas. Why I even have the Noel Yuletide beverage of choice, that would be eggnog. Because after all, if you can't make up your mind which you would rather have, pancakes or beer, well, you just pour beer into pancake batter and drink it and call it eggnog. So Eddie Murphy made his triumphant return to Saturday Night Live this past weekend. 30 plus years since he has been on the show. Of course, he was a cast member. And having been a teenager in the 1980s, I can tell you that in our book, Eddie Murphy was the king of comedy. He was number one. And of course, it got a little rise out of some people that he took a shot at Bill Cosby Saturday night.
And you know what? But if you had told me 30 years ago that I would be this boring, stay-at-home, house dad, and Bill Cosby would be in jail, even I would have took that bet. I'd say, who is America's dad now?
I can't remember now if it was Bill Cosby's manager or agent was offended by what Eddie Murphy did. And of course, he tweeted out a long, pithy response that, Bill Cosby was the first black actor to ever receive an Emmy, which he was. He did groundbreaking television for children that was both funny and educational, with, of course, the moral dilemma lessons taught with the Bill Cosby kids, i.e., hey, 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 Fat Albert. I had the Bill Cosby albums. I used to play bits of Bill Cosby on my radio show. But there comes a point when you have to look at the behavior of someone and say, I'm sorry, but the so-called good they have done has been so overshadowed. We're not talking about a guy who was, quote-unquote, a womanizer. We're talking about a dude who drugged women and then raped them. He had non-consensual sexual relations with almost comatose, if not near corpse-like bodies. That's just all kinds of ew, disgusting, vile, and wrong. And the thing is, I liked Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was a sane voice at one time in Hollywood, in the entertainment establishment, especially when it came to matters of social issues and the black community. It was Bill Cosby who was such an advocate that you can rise, you can be entrepreneurs, you can be business owners, you can be creative, you can be inventors. I mean, that was what the Cosby Show pushed. Hey, let's not have a black situation comedy that happens in a ghetto tenement apartment. How about we portray a black family living as upper middle class, living the good life? Let's give young people, black young people, something to aspire to. All of that was great. And Bill Cosby was at the forefront of that. But that's all been kind of negated when we have learned, and we're not just talking about a couple of women, but literally dozens and dozens and dozens. And I have to admit that when the allegations first surfaced, I really thought this was a liberal attempt to take down Bill Cosby, not because he was a quote-unquote conservative, but he sure didn't preach the party line when it came to black people being able to be strong and successful without government help. And of course, it's turned out to be that Mr. Cosby did some very just unconscionable, unmentionable behavior, and that's awful. But back in the 1980s, when Eddie Murphy's star was on the rise, Bill Cosby was one of his heroes, one of his icons. And Joe Piscopo said today that while they were working together on Saturday Night Live, that Eddie came into Joe's office one morning and was just devastated. Bill Cosby had called him on the phone at NBC and for 20 minutes just berated him and just shred him. He had seen Eddie Murphy's stand-up video, I think it was Raw, and yeah, you know, Eddie Murphy dropped the F-bomb a lot. Understand, though, that stand-up comedic routine by today's standards is so almost tame. But I mean, you know, Bill Cosby was laying into him. You don't have to be dirty. You don't have to be vulgar. You're playing into the white stereotype that black people are nothing but, you know, gangbangers and we're nasty and we're vile. And that just decimated, apparently, Eddie Murphy. Well, fast forward now. The guy who was America's dad, Mr. Pudding Pop, you know, Mr. Clean Comedy, always taking the moral high ground. We find out what an incredibly immoral individual he was. It reminds me a lot of some preachers who they thunder the pulpits against things that they don't particularly like immorality. And immorality is certainly mentioned in Scripture as sinful behavior. And God detests men who live wicked, immoral lives. But some preachers just seem to enjoy absolutely just railing and raking on that. Christianity Today, I might be looking in your direction. Yeah, I still haven't gotten over the hit piece you did on President Trump. Because after all, apparently, you know, Jesus came to save good people. Jesus came to save people who didn't need saving. No, Jesus came to save sinners. Jesus, who sat with heathens and publicans and was criticized by the religious establishment of his era. So now we have Christianity Today trying to take this moral high ground that we can't have a vile man like Donald Trump as our president. But in reality, the behavior they talk about with this man is well in his past. There have been no allegations of anything that he's done since being the president. Of course, I'm probably giving libloons ideas now of things to make up. And so there is something about that Americans hate and detest, and I mean it crosses racial lines, it crosses political lines, it crosses denominational lines. Americans can't stand individuals who raise themselves up as holier than thou and the be-all, end-all examples of how you ought to live, only to find out you ain't living it yourself. That's Bill Cosby. And Eddie Murphy pointed that out. And all's fair in love, war, and comedy. That said, one can't help but wonder the editor that wrote that hit piece on President Donald Trump. What's his moral life like? What skeletons does he have in his closet he doesn't want anybody to find out about? I can tell you, much like the Apostle Paul said, I, Paul, chiefest among sinners, I've sinned. I've done things that I am ashamed of, embarrassed by. There are sins that are certainly well known to the world. I'm not proud of them, don't defend them. But you know, I have zero respect for those who live as if they walk on water. When they flatulate, it doesn't smell. They have no odor or aroma. And they are morally perfect. Hogwash. If they're a man at all, they have a thought life. And certainly something has entered that thought life that shouldn't have been there. Well, it's not the same thing. Really? I do seem to recall that Jesus said, if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, you've already done it. That said, Bill Cosby, wanted to be this moral authority to the black community. And he certainly wasn't. And all Eddie Murphy did was point that out. That the guy that was supposedly so vile, so nasty, now he's the boring dad. That president who's so vile and so nasty has now done more to benefit the church in this country in the rolling back of regulations and getting the government out of our way so that we could actually not just grow this economy, but churches have freedom like they have never had before. And I'm getting ready to write a book about that. Yeah, funny. And all the so-called moral conscience of authorities that just, I'm sorry, as a good Christian, I can't support this president. I'd like to know what you're up to. Oh, do I want to know what you're up to? Hey, that's it for this rant. As you know, we're going to keep posting even throughout the Christmas holiday, so keep checking back. We'll have some stuff on here. Not doing any political content this week on my radio show. We're doing Christmas music and just having a good time, a fun time, a festive holiday Christmas time. But if you need your political fix, come right here. Get it on YouTube. Get it on my BitTube channel. Keep us growing, keep us going, and Merry Christmas.